WomanUp podcast speaks to and about women and non-binary artists, as well as academics, writers, activists, midwives, carers and more. Those challenging ideas and ideals, questioning assumptions and provoking social change. It's a podcast dedicated to creating a living archive of these people and this work that anyone can access. We find those trying to change current structures founded on bias. Those working intersectionally across gender, race, sexuality, disability, as well as having caring responsibilities. We have conversations about lived experiences, achievements and aspirations, as well as fantastic artwork. In 2023, for Series 5, we received a National Lottery Project grant from Arts Council England to take the podcast on tour. This episode was recorded as part of the WomanUp tour, and the conversation took place at Rogue Studios in Manchester. Hello and welcome to the WomanUp podcast on tour. Today we are recording in Rogue Studios in Openshaw in Manchester. Saying that with a question as I look at Laura and Anna. And so we're here today with Laura Yeuile and Anna F.C. Smith. Laura is based here at the Rogue Studios, living in Manchester, and Anna is based in Wigan. Give a little bit of an introduction for you both. Laura Yeuile is an artist and visiting lecturer who recently completed an AHRC-funded practice-based PhD at Northumbria University. The title of that was Ungating Community, Opening the Enclosures of Financialised Housing. Laura has a multidisciplinary practice exploring entanglements between domestic and urban space through matters of community, sustainability and obsolescence, and the effects of globalisation and tech development. And I'm going to read Anna's from my screenshot earlier. Anna F.C. Smith is a Wigan-based multimedia artist. She studied critical fine art practice at the University of Brighton, graduating in 2007, and has exhibited internationally. Smith explores social history, folk culture, and ritual through historical and anthropological research. Creating sculpture, installation, performance, and group actions, her works emerge as multidimensional, symbolic collages spanning eras and forms of material culture. Touching on politics and performative space, she examines power and community, juxtaposing the low culture and irreverence of communal tradition with the pageantry and ceremony of governance. Seeking links contemporary society has to its predecessors. She sees history and ritual as means to interpret the present. Welcome, both of you.
Hi.
Hi. And thanks for having us here as well.
Oh, thanks for having us here.
Yeah. So I'll give a little bit of context to where we are. We're in Rogue Studios, which Amy and I hadn't known about until we were introduced to it recently, and then Laura invited us to come and record here. But it turns out that a guest from our previous episode also has a studio here because it's pretty big studios in Manchester, and it's one of the largest studio spaces in the UK outside of London, I believe. That's what Google told me.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that, but it is pretty big.
Yeah, there are about 100 spaces here. It's a really, really old building. It's
an old school.
Yeah, and it's a CIC, so Community Interest Company. And yeah, lots and lots of spaces here, and there are some rain leaks coming in spaces around the building, which are
fortunately not in
quite exciting. Not in this space, no.
It's not an artist studio if it's not got a rain leak. So.
I think you're right, yeah. But it's great, but yeah, thank you.
This is actually my first time here, but this downstairs, the exhibition in your exhibition space is it's got a couple of artists from my artist collective in Wigan involved it, so I feel kind of glad that I got a chance to come over because I'll check that exhibition out as well. So
Rogue used to have a more central location actually until maybe a few years ago or 5 years ago
really?
Or something. Yeah.
So is this a new building?
So they had to move to a new building.
Interesting.
When they got evicted.
I wonder if my information was up to date then or not. Well, regardless,
this is a much bigger building and a much better building in my opinion.
Okay, excellent. Laura, I knew of your work, Museum of Modern Shopping, through Instagram. You know, space of all knowledge. Can you tell me about where the idea for that and, you know, your kind of gut instinct for work of that ilk has come from, please?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of, Museum of Modern Shopping was kind of born from lockdowns, I guess. Although I guess previous works have also kind of looked at kind of consumer behaviour and retail spaces. But I guess in lockdown, I guess just the absurdity of kind of everyone, well, not everyone, but those who were able to be kind of restricted to their homes. And yet on went all these kind of international deliveries of some not so important goods and some more important deliveries of like supermarket groceries and things. And just I guess that kind of intensified situation of this switch to shopping online. And I just actually, I kind of started an Instagram account as a bit of just a laugh, a bit of fun, because it felt like there were more and more bizarre kind of sponsored ads appearing. And I don't know if it's just because I was spending way more time online than usual, or if it's because, that these companies knew everyone was stuck at home and was susceptible to kind of buying things just to entertain themselves. But particularly that wish.com website, which doesn't seem, I don't get ads for anymore. But at that time, it was just a constant like bombardment of these ridiculously bizarre products that I don't know if anyone bought. But friends started telling me that they had bought some of these kind of weird products. But anyway, it kind of came out of that. And then after the final lockdown,
I want to say some examples of those products, because that's what hooked me in, I think, like just you highlighting.
Like shoes for cats. What else? Like penis enlargement oil.
Yeah, and isn't
clearly
like
won't work.
I mean, it would work.
£2,
but only temporarily.
I bought a Coca-Cola fake, obviously Coca-Cola branded detox tea, which was claiming you could lose weight by drinking it.
I'm just pulling it up on Instagram.
A friend of mine actually bought some fish flip-flops.
Oh yeah, I saw a few people buy
but they were
those.
too small. They were like ridiculously small. So then she chopped them in half and turned them into earrings.
Oh. Yeah, those fish flip-flops were going wild
There's
for a while.
I'm just looking on the Instagram site now, and there's like the dog mating toys as well. So like
it's like a sex toy for dogs.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So
really
that was.
My dog used to use the cat tunnel that we had. Like that's what she got excited with. So.
I knew a dog that used a squeaking goose. It was like a goose that squeaks when you bite it, but then it was really, really like
arousing,
really loud.
Yeah. But the project was like looking at the absurdity of like the online shopping market, wasn't it? And also the effect of that on the retail spaces.
Yeah, I guess also, at the same time, obviously loads of smaller independent businesses were having to close down. Well, not just, Debenhams and kind of huge chains were also closing down. And then there, was it Boohoo or Pretty Little Things that were found to have workers in a factory in Leicester?
Mm-hmm. I think it was Boohoo.
Lincoln, Leicester, one of the ones that starts with an L.
Yeah.
Boohoo, who are also based in Manchester. And they were paying the workers less than minimum wage, like quite significantly less than minimum wage, and pretending that the factory was closed down, but in fact they were there working through lockdown. And the ads for Boohoo were increasing, and people were buying, loungewear because they were stuck at home, and you need to look good when you're stuck at home. Just kind of all those situations, I think, that are, normal within capitalism, but really became heightened by the pandemic experience. And then afterwards, I kind of got use of an empty retail unit and programmed a series of exhibitions throughout 2022.
Yeah, I saw those. And I saw recently, now this is something that really interests me about your work. Some of it I can't tell whether it's a real thing or not, and I like that excites me. But like you talk about a residency in John Lewis, was that an actual thing, or was that like I couldn't tell whether it was a thing or not?
It was a thing, but well, actually, that I've been working in John Lewis as a brand ambassador for Norton Antivirus for the past couple of months, like 3 days a week, which is a temporary job, and I guess I had. being an a brand ambassador felt a bit like being an artist in residence, because you're kind of temporarily placed there to sell a product. I didn't actually work for John Lewis. So I kind of wanted to see if I could somehow claim back the experience of working there as some form of residency. And I'd planned to kind of somehow stage some kind of exhibition throughout the store. My time there is soon coming to an end, and I'm not sure what the outcome of this residency is going to be, because it turns out it's an incredibly boring job, because I can't do the actual shop retail worker tasks that make it more interesting, like serving customers on a till or stocking things up. Okay. I'm literally just standing there trying to sell Norton, and there's no customers and no one's interested in buying Norton. So, but rather than giving me time to kind of come up with something, I feel like it's just had the opposite effect, and like I just feel brain dead being there. Okay. So I'm not sure what the outcome of that is.
Were you able to control what was on the videos that you were like? I was thinking of it, and I was
well,
like,
I thought. But essentially no, because it turns out all those TVs and laptops just are programmed to show this kind of display thing. But I'm still going to try and do something.
I got quite excited at the idea of you surreptitiously
I wanted to
changing what's shown on those
on the TV
window displays
but
of
that's
TVs.
something interesting that you could take forward. I mean, so you can't do it in situ, but you can take that forward potentially.
Yeah.
The brain deadness is an interesting point as well.
Yeah. Well, it's just like the situation of doing nothing in this kind of quite, well, boring but quite intense space. I don't know. I feel like I couldn't even think of anything else.
Yeah, I think it's something that affects a lot of us, especially when so many of us have to work we work other jobs, we have other parts of our lives that are often take up far more time than our what we consider to be our art practice maybe. Anna, you're a new mum.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned to me that you're living at your mum's as well. So how are you managing in terms of your art practice at the moment?
Well, I was going to kind of just add something onto the thing. I just wanted to tell you about when I was a brand ambassador for this. Well, it's like I had to sell like a kind of a card to sell like a trade card. But I had a T-shirt and it said like it's quick and easy. And on the back of the T-shirt it said no, not me.
Oh my god!
Oh my god!
This trade card. I just felt really
horrible.
exploited. Yeah, it was horrible.
Where were you?
Like it's kind of like a B&Q type thing, but it wasn't B&Q. I can't remember now. It was back in uni. It was like it's like Wix.
Okay.
It's like a kind of look, but anyway,
Wow.
My T-shirt just says Norton.
Not quick and easy.
You can't catch a virus off me. I don't know.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So I'm a new mum. Yeah. So so when I found out I was pregnant, I was like really excited, but also I was like really nervous about like letting anybody in the sort of art world know. It was a very strange sensation actually. I found. And I had a solo show booked in, and I just thought I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna do it. So I did inform the curator like kind of a little bit too late into the proceedings that I actually was pregnant, but I said don't worry, it'll be fine. So it was kind of like in the second. Well, I did a little bit of work just right up until I'd gone into labour, and then I had a baby, which was really painful. And then after that, it was about sort of 2 months in, and the solo show was going to happen. So I just went to the studio and just worked ridiculously hard with the baby in the pram, and friends came and helped, and my mum looked after him sometimes, and my partner's just amazing. So he was like looking after him quite a lot as well. And I managed to get a solo show out and done and up, and I was quite happy with it. So that was at Warrington Museum and Art Gallery.
Brilliant.
And that was a show about, I'd been asked to respond to the museum's collection, and in the museum's collection there's this room they call it the Museum of Curiosities room, and it's got some really unusual pieces in there, including this horrific but really kind of awesome in that kind of like ancient use of the word, iron gibbet. It holds the body of a criminal after they'd been hung. They're then encased in this human-shaped iron cage. It's kind of like a Gormley sculpture or something like that. and then hung on the roadsides. It was a really specific additional punishment for highway robbers and pirates.
To display the body, essentially.
Yeah.
Is that as a warning to others? Or,
So it was like a warning to others. So this iron gibber was one of many that have been used in Warrington to display the body of highway robbers.
Okay.
And so that was kind of just sitting there, just vibrating in the cabinet. And it's like, it's so ominous and disgusting, but yet it's kind of fascinating and ghostly. I don't know, it's just had its real presence. So I just thought it'd be really interesting to do a project on kind of that public presentation, that public theatre of punishment, and how, because I normally do stuff a little bit more around maybe the public being a bit more rebellious, but this is the public getting involved in the state's
state control.
State control, yeah. So without the public, that form of state control can't happen. It needs the public to kind of partake in it. Like they're kind of willing participants, but at the same time as being willing participants, and they actually did quite a lot of similar things, like drinking at hangings and, you know, being quite raucous and stuff like that. But it's all sort of almost for the benefit of the state, kind of keeping the state control happening.
Yeah.
And the sort of the sculptural objects that the state created are like really interesting moments of people meeting, whereas normally my work's maybe more about spaces that people meet, like obelisks and town centres or market crosses or water wells or things like that, where people kind of commune and they're a little bit more neutral perhaps, but they've got a little bit of power in there, a little bit of rebellion in there. But these things are kind of like just you know, you couldn't have much more of a state control thing than a stocks in the middle of the town centre, because that's all, like, the power is being played out in that central object. So so that was what the project was about. And it was really funny because people were saying to me, like, oh, you know, when you're a mother, you'll just make work about motherhood. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it about hanging. So, corpses rotting in the streets. No, but yeah, so that was my first project back into being a mother. And then since then, I've had a couple of. I had a group project that I was doing because I work collaboratively with an artist called Helen Mather, who's based in Manchester. And we started working together on a project about female reform societies from the kind of era of Peterloo Massacre, kind of 1819. And then we kind of moved into doing stuff around botanical societies, which are these working class groups of people who got together, were interested in botany. I'll tell you about that again in a bit. But we had, that project was finishing up as well. So it was for Arts Assembly, so it was all of the Manchester galleries. And we kind of did a project working with fashion students at Manchester College, and we'd work with them going out, looking at lichen and stuff like that, and then they'd created designs. So we had a piece, there was a kind of a big massive tent that they'd created, and then it had zines, we made badges, and we talked to people about botanical society and stuff. So so that also happened like really soon into having the baby, so I had to bring him along with that as well. So it's not been the worst. And then we've been living at my mum's for about 6 months as well. So that's been an interesting thing because I've had the support from my mum, but also my mum's a little bit older now. So, and we lost my dad just the year before. Well, I actually found out I was pregnant about a month after I'd lost my dad. So it's quite
sorry.
Yeah. Ugh, I wish I hadn't said that. Anyway. But yeah, so it's my mum's been going through a bit of a difficult time, so it's been kind of like intense, but also really great to have her so close. So it's been a very unusual experience. But my dad said, keep working. So that's kind of like what I've been doing.
Special bonding time for your mum and you as well.
Yeah, it's been really great. And for my mum to have that time with Perrin has just been amazing anyway. So like I feel a bit like I don't want to move home. I do want to move back to my house and have independence, but also I don't know, it's a kind of strange thing really, because I don't want to tear Perrin away from my mum, and I don't want to almost lose that support as well that's in the house. Like if I need to nip for a meeting on Zoom, I can do, or I can just about get some work done late at night.
It's very handy, isn't it, having someone nearby. Your work is often quite sculptural, quite large pieces. Do you tend to make new work each time you're at a site, or is it work that you kind of redevelop, replay with? In terms of these, I'm thinking of the the stuff, I mean, the term, I'm taking these terms from you, like the foolish type stuff, the folk, you know, folk recreations and bawdy type of objects, you know, do you often make new of those each time?
So I'm trying to probably find a way in my practice now to start to reuse things, because I'm probably too specific when I'm making stuff. Like I'll pull up references in the research that I'm doing, and things will kind of lead to one type of look of an object to another. But they always revolve around kind of pageant vehicles, movable objects, and then also stationary things like an arch or a obelisk or something like that. So they kind of keep skirting around the same types of objects, but the individual things seem to be, I can only really imagine how to make new. And so but I did a nice little show for Castlefield New Art Spaces windows, because they had in Wigan they had gallery windows which were in the old M&S building, and for that I kind of brought quite a lot of random sort of ceramics and sculptures together to kind of create a sort of new marketplace scene, whatever, and that kind of worked. That collaging was working, so now I'm thinking like, well, that would be quite useful, because it's a lot trying to build massive things every time, and the problem is storage. Really, storage is just an absolute nightmare, so I need to get bigger every time.
Yeah, it's very hard to make sculptural work.
I don't know that there's a whole I have this kind of like tight-chested feeling sometimes about art in general, which is that kind of like that generation of new objects all the time. It feels really quite wasteful. You know, at the same time it's feeling really important and it's essential and you need to do it, and you ache if you've not been making for a while, you feel frustrated. You kind of generate these things and they have a moment and then they're just kind of obsolete. And it feels so wrong to be doing that in the, you know, in 23, whatever year we're in, but like with the state of the planet and stuff, it just, there's a kind of, I have a real real sort of problem with it, but I don't know how to fix that yet.
Because bit of attention
there, the only option would be to stop making, but then that's not really a stand, is it?
Yeah, no, I've had the same kind of issues of having to throw work out because I have nowhere to store it. But I've kind of started, well, partly like trying to rethink how I make art so that I can get out of that loop of like generating all these things, having nowhere to put them, putting them in the bin. Like, I don't know, it does feel ridiculous. But I guess, I mean, yeah, it's wasteful, it's not great, but in the grand scheme of things, I guess art's carbon footprint isn't huge. Maybe art fairs and the kind of... I'm not sure really. I mean, I think like I do a lot of papier-mâché work, and I recycle my partner's father's Daily Mails, so I try and put them to good use after the evil that they're doing. Yeah, that's nice. Give them another way.
But so there's some recycling goes on, but still there's a kind of that process of making can feel very like I was using mod rock, and I'm not quite sure what the, you know, like it's kind of finding sort of like decent, at least eco materials and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've just been working with like broken electronics that people have
that's
like
nice.
trying to throw out or throwing out.
Is that what we can see here in the corner of the
you can see a bit. Those are like phones from old phones from an office. But yeah, ultimately, if I run out of storage, then I just they have to go to, you know, they have to be thrown out anyway.
But that is nice though, because you're giving them a second
at least
use,
like delaying
their
death.
Delaying the plastic death.
But then it's even harder to get rid of like a Pebble Dash TV than it is to just get rid of a broken TV.
Laura, I want to come back to asking you about a recent project it's been going for a few years, and it fed into your PhD or came out of your PhD, I'm not sure which way around. That project's called Asset Arrest, where you've used it as a podcast series, or the platform is a podcast series, and you have invited artists to join you on viewing properties. Is that right? Can you tell us a bit about that and kind of...
So Asset Arrest, I guess I kind of started the process that became the podcast when I moved to London, I'm in Manchester now obviously, but previously moved to London about 9 years ago. And it just kind of came out of just observing all the kind of property development going on in the city, and, you know, feeling like half the city was becoming this kind of very inaccessible luxury space, a lot of which just sits empty, obviously. So I'd started kind of just going to view the properties, pretending I was interested in buying them, and I kind of wanted to make some work out of this and tried different things. Like, I took an actor and tried to make a film of the actual viewing, which didn't work. It was dreadful. But eventually I arrived at the idea of kind of publishing a podcast series. So every episode is basically a viewing of a different property, and I take a guest. A lot of them have been artists who maybe work with like ideas around housing or urban space. Some have been activists or academics or other, you know, people who have knowledge or experience of a particular development. So we kind of record a conversation before the viewing where we maybe talk about my guest's work or research or experience. We talk about the kind of the area we're in and our expectations of the house we're going to see. And then the actual viewing I don't record. And then afterwards we record another conversation kind of reflecting on what we've seen. And I publish, the audio becomes, I guess I see it as this kind of, I mean, it's partly a performance between us and the estate agent, but then the audio I see as kind of publishing these exclusive spaces and also kind of creating this alternative image of them through language, rather than the kind of like CGI or, you know, kind of idealized imagery that we're used to kind of encountering them through. And I've also, it started kind of as tours I did for the Anti-University Festival, where people could sign up and I'd take 2 or 3 people at a time on a viewing, which I've done a few times, mostly for that festival. And that's again about kind of helping people access these spaces, because it can be obviously quite intimidating to pretend you've got like £20 million and enter these spaces when you don't feel like you look like a millionaire. But I've kind of, because I've done it so much, I guess, got used to it, and it just feels like a job. So yeah, in those tours, I kind of act as like, a kind of middle person between the agent and the public that sign up. And then they can participate in the discussion with the estate agent as much as they want or don't want. And I'm the one who gets all the annoying follow-up sales calls.
Yeah. It's like a really interesting critical dialogue of space use, isn't it, and development.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was thinking about the way that property developers in London have been using the arts a lot, or kind of cultural placemaking to brand themselves in a certain way. For example, London City Island, where our bike gallery is, and where I very briefly had a studio. And yeah, we have arts organisations and artists kind of, I guess, benefiting in a way from these kind of offers of cheaper, reduced rates space. But at the same time, you know, there's obviously expectations on the developers' part where I'm sure they would have issue with certain artworks being shown in a gallery. They had issue with the way me and my neighbours, friends in the studios were using our studios. At one point, they asked us to tidy up the inside of our studio which was on the first floor, I think. Yeah, because people could see in the window and it looked a mess. So they were kind of trying to control what was actually inside these spaces that we were paying money for. And then it transpired that they were even telling residents who rented or owned property there to tidy up their house, to tidy their house up, particularly in the people that rented the kind of affordable housing block they made, who might have, I think they had a real problem with like people having children's toys at the window or hanging their washing to dry on the balcony. So there was this weird infiltration of your personal space by the developers. So SRS became a way, I guess, to kind of claim back space from them and use it for my own
Yeah,
purpose.
I love it. It's like flipping that use, isn't it? By you going in and using them rather than them using you as an artist.
And kind of treating their spaces as almost like a museum that the public should be able to access.
Yeah.
which you can. You just have to say you've got enough money. They don't ask any questions.
My mum would love doing that. I think I need to do that with her.
There used to be, I think there still was in situ some laws in Brighton about things like your washing out on the front and
actual laws.
Yeah, like your bylaws, like within the town, like town bylaws.
Yeah, that's probably. I mean, I'm sure that is.
So they're
thing.
quite an ancient sort of thing where people trying to control sort of like the way that spaces are used, and because Brighton was a new town developed for kind of like a kind of rich pleasure-seeking town, it wasn't really kind of, it was like a little fishing village that had not much going on, and then it was like taken interest by sort of like Georgian sort of fashionistas or whatever. But yeah, so they made like rules about how people could use their public parts of their things, but they were still in situ in the houses. So if you were like the students renting, but there was like certain streets you weren't allowed to like have washing in the front and stuff like that. But
I've heard of it.
It's just an interesting thing of like, you know, like it's not a modern phenomenon that people kind of like build houses and then try and control how people use them. They have this sort of aesthetic ideal of like what they want a place to look like.
Because I had a flat previously where it was signed into the lease that you couldn't hang your washing on the like little tiny balcony that there was, and no bikes allowed. And I know that as soon as everyone moved in, they're like, whatever, that is our only space. But I hadn't realised that there were laws around it, because you know that there's like the social pressure. Like my parents, we grew up in a little village in East Yorkshire, and there'd be like Britain in Bloom. Does anyone remember Britain in Bloom? I don't even know if you still have such
I think it still goes. I think it still happens.
Okay, so Britain in Bloom, it was like, you know, some villages and towns would enter, and the whole village or town is meant to make it look nice and pretty, and then people come and judge it, and you try to. We lived in this little tiny village, only about 50 houses, probably not even that, I don't know, 40 houses. And like you were judged if you did not make the front of your house. So like my mum, like the little tiny cottage that we had, mum was like putting some pots out the front. I mean, she was always really good at that anyway. But it was horrendous, like the pressure, because you just had your neighbours massively judging you if your house was not the one that looked nice.
I've heard about it in like US suburbs, where there's like neighbourhood regulations around how long your grass can be and things.
Oh my god!
there was a thing, like, cause obviously like in sort of like Wigan and that, like, you know, Bolton and places like that, the whole sort of like keeping your front step clean and like your front room of your house wasn't even used. Because like
friends who had a room, like we didn't have enough room.
You weren't allowed to use one room, and that would have like its impressed. You know, washed and pressed sort of lace in the window, and that had to look pristine, and you're obviously considered to be super slovenly and, you know, like terrible if you didn't upkeep your front step. And it was like a kind of weekly job at least to donkey stone your step.
That's like my mum and dad's. My mum's from West Yorkshire, my dad's from West Yorkshire, but on the border, and they were very much like that. You know, it was you kind of kept up appearances, or at least from the outside, your neighbours had to think that you were well. My dad was a real working class snob. You had to make things look a certain way.
This is also just reminded me, like I was saying. So me and Helen did that project about
Helen Knowles.
Helen Mather.
Oh, Helen Mather.
Did a project around. So it was female reform societies from sort of 1819. They pretty much formed and almost. Yeah, they formed in 1819 everywhere. So all around Manchester. But they were women supporting the male ask for the vote. So they weren't particularly asking for the vote for themselves. So it was like it was like 100 years before suffragettes. But they used over effeminate kind of language a lot of the time to sort of be persuasive, but using the kind of like as mothers and daughters and we support our. But then they also had this like really kind of like violent streak that they sort of like hid, but kind of used. But it was interesting anyway. But one thing that they spoke about actually was how they keep the houses. I just remember there was a thing about keeping the houses and about how you had this. It was important that they were kept in this particular way so that they couldn't be deemed as being their family wouldn't be deemed as unworthy of having the vote because they weren't a mob. Yeah. They took this pride and they made sure that the front of their houses was even in the dire poverty that they were living in. And
I would
It's just
definitely
a-
lose the vote if anyone checked my flat.
Yeah.
But I'm on the 15th floor, so no one can see it.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's, yeah, absolutely. I don't lift a finger. I don't have the time. I just, like, yeah.
I read the book 5 about the 5 women who were the known victims of Jack the Ripper, and in that book, the historian who's done her work, and I can't remember her name, which is terrible, who's done her work and written this book. There's a lot of guesswork going on and story being made out of it, but a lot of the accurate reports about it were around people's eyewitnesses, which a lot of the eyewitness statements were around the woman's appearance, as we're always aware of, but also like how they kept their homes. Like they were known to not wash the curtains, or they were known to have not keep their rooms well. Landlords would say it was a thing, like the landlords would be reporting on whether the homes were kept to the right standard or not, basically, and it like was a social judgment, wasn't it?
So that was that suggests they were bad women, or
immoral, like literally immoral. Like that's the kind of like
But I still don't think that's gone anyway. I think there's still massive. Like I remember when my kids were little, like the idea of people coming round when everything was everyone was like, it can this was fine to come round. Any of like your family coming? No, I need like 3 days before they could come because it's not. I'll feel judged.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I'm like I have ADHD, and so I've never been very good. Like doom piles everywhere. It's really terrible. So like now I've got a kid. It's like. It's horrific because I'm trying to keep on top of it, but the mental anguish it takes to try and keep on top of it, let alone trying to kind of maintain doing like keep on top of emails and obviously care for him and spend time with him. It's just
it's
just
matter,
too much,
does it? And it's not even important.
It's too much. It's not even important. But my partner also has it, and so does my mum. So yeah, it's really embarrassing if people come to my mum's house at the moment.
We shouldn't be embarrassed, should we?
No.
We should just
I don't
not
have
care.
kids, and my house is still a mess. And
I
don't care. I'm always happy going to someone's house.
Good
Lord.
This is the thing, honestly. Like it was prior to Perrin. It's really not his fault. It's just a few more additional things. Like, most of it's my stuff, to be honest. But
I think a lot of people are actually relieved if they, unless they're really worried about things like that. I've got some friends who've got OCD and they need things a really certain way, and I find it much less pressure if I know people can come in and relax because the house is messy, because they know they can put a cup of tea down over.
I always find it really upsetting though when I go to other people's house and they go, "I'm really sorry, it's a mess," and I go, "This is a mess."
Pristine.
I would class this as being like show home.
I think people just feel compelled to say that, don't they? Just in case case you're like.
I'm trying to like not apologise now though. I'm thinking I'm just not going to apologise.
Yeah. Good.
Unless of
come and enjoy. I even do it in my car.
Break their neck coming down the stairs or whatever, which then I'll apologise. But otherwise, yeah.
Right. I want to ask something about work. Let's have a little look. Laura, so Amy and I saw a performance of yours, which was done at Oxytocin conference in 2019, which was a Procreate and Birth Rights Commission, which is called Once You Care, Your Future. That was performance-based, but you used the commission to employ people to come in to do that. Is that right? You have other people doing the work?
Yeah, wow. Somehow 2019 feels like so long ago. I think it's just because it was before the whole pandemic. I made these kind of quite disgusting and ugly like cleaning implements using a lot of kind of not baby, I was going to say babies, but like dolls, dolls, not real babies. And then kind of paid a few people to come in and use them to kind of clean the entrance of the space at King's College, just throughout the whole day as the symposium was going on. And there was, on the kind of tannoy system, I'd recorded a kind of audio track that was meant to sound like, kind of announcements with a bit of radio in between, which was kind of different statements about having or not having children, and kind of this idea of like the child as this kind of figure or imagination of the future. And I think, Birthrights Collection had commissioned me because they'd wanted to kind of work with a couple of artists who didn't have children, because obviously usually, you know, it's a collection of work about motherhood, and I think they'd commissioned performances before from, you know, artist mothers. So yeah, it was kind of about not having children in a way, and, you know, but observing this kind of world where the child is considered as this like beacon of the future. And I guess the kind of, Lee Edelman, who's written about the kind of queer opposition to this idea of the child as this kind of image of the future, which, I was thinking a lot about as someone who's decided not to have children.
Yeah. So big. So what? I don't know who that. You've just referenced that person. So what? Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Probably not. I just read one of his books, which is about this, you know, this idea, this kind of like queer death drive, I guess. And I guess it was a book against, this kind of very parent-dominated view on the future, and kind of gearing everything towards making a future for the children.
Yeah. It's another massive form of social control, really, isn't it? In how we look at children and expectations of what that means.
I kind of found it like a really sort of pointless, it's like a pointless cycle, because you sort of get to a certain point within your life, you are the ambition of your parents or whatever, and then particularly when you're sort of like as disorganized as somebody like me, but the idea that you kind of get to a certain point, but then you have to then procreate, so it's for the next generation, but you are potentially then held back on your own potential trajectory. It's sort of like, you know, it almost felt like I kind of struggled with that quite a lot, and I struggled with that idea, like, you know, pre-being pregnant, and then when I got pregnant, I struggled with it being pregnant, and I still struggle with it now when I'm having real problems getting stuff done, or I can't do things. And I know that changes, and I know there's many people who have children and are ridiculously organised and successful, and there's people who choose different paths, and that is a new path for them, so that's, and no judgment there either. So I'm not trying to sort of like be judgy on that, but it did feel to me like my point in being is not to produce a child. Like, my point in being is like, I've got to this point now in my life, and I'm getting to a certain level of mediocre success, but you know, I want to push that, and I want to try harder, and like, you know, my goal was never to have children. My goal was to sort of achieve something that felt like, I don't know. I don't quite know what my achievement pinnacle would be, but
I mean, I think it's quite an
to think and to make. It's like, I don't know, that sort of
Well, it's like an old-fashioned idea. You have a baby, and suddenly.
But then it's like, you
are the child.
But then the hopes for them become what your drive is, and it's sort of like, and people talk about that, like this idea of parental sacrifice is so. It's so pedestaled, parental sacrifice, and it frustrates me quite a lot, because I think, you know, there are sacrifices, but I don't think we should sort of encourage people talking about this idea of like, you just do it all for the kids, you know, that kind of weird mantra. Also, why though? Also, because what will they do? Then they'll do it all for, you know, like, there's no end goal here. Yeah. Like, you know, you surely must do something for you. And obviously, then, you know, if you have got children, support them.
It's like a deflecting or a delaying.
But if so for what? Because what are they going to do? They're just going to do everything for their kids. So what have you done? I don't know. It just to me, it just kind of feels like there's a concept of sacrifice, particularly with motherhood. But there's a concept that the sacrifice is the most important, and there's a selfishness sometimes in sort of not finding uncomfortableness with that, you know.
But that cycle that you talk about is very societally influenced, isn't it? In like my teenagers are already like not feeling pressure, but they already get asked questions like by the grandparents about, you know, when you're a parent, it's this massive assumption. And I in fact, me and my partner are so quick to say if you have kids, that my son recently said, would you actually be happy if I did want to have children? And I'm like, well, if that's your choice,
your
that's
son
absolutely
asked that.
yeah,
Oh.
that's absolutely fine. But it's like, would you be really excited? I was like, I don't know. I'm like, this is your choice. It's like I'm not living my life to see what children you have. I'd like just happy for you to do what you want to do. And we had to have another conversation later because he'd walked away going, I don't think that my parents even want me to have kids. It's like, it's not about that. It's not. This shouldn't be about what we want.
Yeah. It's not your plan
quite
for
a
their
difficult
future.
conversation.
Yeah,
but it's that social control again and capitalism.
I always just assumed, and I think rightly, that my parents would love me to have kids. So I just told them, announced a few years ago, by the way, I'm not going to have kids. And then felt better. That they at least knew that. So they weren't like hoping.
Yeah. You could relax.
Or if I was like, no, I'm not having a drink, and they're like, oh, getting excited that I might be pregnant.
Oh, yeah. The constant guesswork.
I was like, I just like faked drinking alcohol the whole time so people didn't
That's
ask
a
me.
good idea.
Just like water in vodka bottles and stuff like that. I just like, but then people then probably, when they found out I was pregnant, be like, oh my God, it's like, no, I wasn't
Drunk the whole way through.
Drinking vodka straight from the bottle.
Yeah, I was just drinking water out of wine glasses, so it looked like I was drinking on social media posts and stuff.
So we're kind of coming to the end of our time. I wanted to ask you both, you're both pretty prolific in terms of how much work you've produced over the last few years, which is awesome, brilliant. You seem to have quite a lot of opportunities as well, both of you. I know that Anna, you've been based in the Northwest for most of the time. I don't know about all, but and then Laura, you are new to the Northwest, but you've kind of worked all over the UK. How is it for both of you being in the Northwest? Like, do you feel like there are enough opportunities? Does it excite you to be here? Are you like, tell me a little bit about that.
You want to go first because you're longer term?
So I came back up after uni. Pretty much straight away because everyone was going to London, everyone exodused to London, but I didn't really feel like I wanted to do London. I kind of wanted to build on some stuff that I'd been doing already in Wigan, like in my sort of like summer breaks, stuff like that. I was running down Arts Festival up here, and I don't find being in the Northwest like that like limiting at all. I find it really kind of like, I find it really there's a sort of potentiality. There's a feeling of all the time. And so even in spaces like in Wigan, where it has like dips and dives in terms of its kind of cultural output, and then it's had some really great sort of little mini renaissances, and then things dip down again, it feels like there's always something to really fight for, and you're not kind of knocking at sort of like big doors in the way that maybe somewhere like London felt to me. I'm not saying that it is like that, but it kind of felt like there's a lot to build anywhere, but it feels like there's stuff to build on and there's stuff going on all the time for me. So if it's not there, I always thought you just do it anyway. You just make it happen. So you take over a shop unit or you get together with some mates, whatever. So it's never really felt at all limiting. And I was at Birthrights Collection. I was assistant curator / intern like years ago. And like things like that, opportunities like that, just to have those little moments to kind of do stuff. It just it's really built my kind of confidence. But then because I live in Wigan particularly, you're right on the West Coast main line, so it's like 2 hours to London, 2 hours to Glasgow. It's really so it's commutable. Yeah. It doesn't feel like everything's got to be in the Northwest. Like you can have your shows all over the place, and it's quite easy to get to everywhere. I even did a residency in Glasgow, and some of it I was up there, but then for other parts of it, when I didn't have use of the flat that I'd been given, because it was like a kind of use, they had other people stay there as well. I just commuted, and I would spend a day in Glasgow and come back to Wigan. It's to me it feels like a real sort of a springboard space that's kind of like just about affordable, and it's kind of got really friendly people, and there's always sort of stuff ebbing and flowing around, and there's a nice community really. So to me, I'm happy.
How about you, Laura? How long have you been?
I moved to I live in Salford. I moved here about 8 months ago, I think. My partner got a job here, and I was working remotely at the time, so And I had the hope, I'm going to say some things that sound a bit more negative now, not about the Northwest, but just about the situation in the UK. Yeah, I hate it. No. I'd kind of thought, naively, not stupidly, just reasonably, that moving here would mean cheaper rent, cheaper things, but moving in 2022, it became apparent that the rental market is way more fucked than usual, like unbelievable. I think in Manchester rents increased 30% over the past year. So I'm paying essentially the same as I was in London, though I did live in Zone 4, so it was, not super high London rent. It was an absolute nightmare finding a place to rent. We were being rejected for everything we applied for because people were offering over the already high asking price. So in a way, it's been really difficult making the move when I actually thought there would be some, I guess, kind of like financial benefits. But I think that's just indicative of the situation in most cities in the UK at the moment, and it's just awful. And then in terms of like, I think it is great that, I can hop on a train to London and it's 2 hours, but actually I can't because train prices are so insane at the moment.
Yeah, and also
I think when I was
probably talking just pre the country completely.
Yeah,
collapsed.
no, I mean I'm talking specifically about the post-COVID,
this
post-Brexit world that seems to have just got increasingly worse. But yeah, when I was trying to come to Manchester to view flats, I think at one point for like a economy class train ticket, it was like £200 each way. Like a couple of weeks before. I think this was around the train strike times, so maybe the price was up. But I was just like, how is that possible? Like, and the train prices are not that crazy usually, but I think that's definitely an access problem if you're, for some reason, like maybe it's travelling in or out of London is more expensive. I can't remember, but
there's definitely something. Well, we know what's happened to the country, but it feels like it's on an absolute and utter downward spiral in every. So what that kind of singing praise about living up here in terms of opportunity and stuff. You can build things or whatever, but at the same time, it doesn't have an overall positive vibe. But I don't think that's being here as much as being in the UK.
I think
it's just got this horrible sense of like deep rot now.
Yeah, I would have experienced the same moving to any city at that point in time, and then the train thing is, that's just a problem all over. But in general, like I really like the city, and I don't feel particularly ingrained in the kind of art scene here yet, but it seems like.
How long have you been here?
Yeah, just like 8 months, I think.
Oh right, okay, so
maybe Anna can help.
Yeah. I'm just going to go and see my friend who's just got a studio at Islington. Helen, I've just mentioned her a million times today, but Helen Mather, she just got a studio recently at Islington.
One of the new ones.
Yeah, I don't really know actually. I don't know. I'm going to go and find out, but yeah, she just took the plunge. But there is a nice community of people, and it's kind of broad, and obviously it's kind of national. The community is national. Instagram, people know people. It's really not like.
It's also nice being so close to other cities like Liverpool and Leeds, and kind of just being able to.
Yeah, that is
travel around the Northwest.
Yeah,
so quickly.
We need a better integrated system around that. But like I've got a project at the moment at Hebden Bridge, and it's not too hard to get to, and that's just been a really nice thing. But I find the countryside around here like ridiculously lovely and easy to get to. So there's that kind of, you get that the urbanness, but you also have sort of amazing green spaces like really quite close by, and you can you can be in Leeds in an hour. It's.
It's a great place, isn't it? Thank you both of you for giving your time to come and talk to us. It's it's really, really good to hear about your work. We'll post links in the podcast notes so listeners can check out your work, check out your projects. I think, Anna, I'm going to come to you for any questions I have on social history. I love it.
I may or may not know, but I'll find out.
I'm going to be haunted by those cage things for ages.
Yeah, they're awful, but they're weirdly brilliant. They're not brilliant. I don't know what I mean.
Just interesting.
They've just got a presence. They've got a horrible presence, like a haunted house. Like, not like, oh, that's a nice haunted house. You wouldn't say that, but you are like drawn to the of the concept of it.
And thinking of how many bodies have passed through it.
Yeah. Oh no, they made it specifically.
Oh no, it was because I'd been
for each one.
Yeah. And they just left them, and then they just fell. Like, you know, so they'd be up for like 20 years or something.
Oh, I thought they would reuse them.
This is almost like could be added into your museum of modern shopping. Almost like finding the kind of similar. What would it be nowadays online?
Yeah, maybe Museum of Modern Shopping needs to do like a show in a museum with a weird, terrifying collection.
You should put
the old curiosities.
Put a pitch into Warrington Museum and Art Gallery, because they have a rolling programme in that space and in the other. They have a couple of contemporary spaces, but they're always looking for people to respond to the collection or to do things that sort of like sit in the collection in an interesting way. And they have a whole bit on like the beer bottles and stuff upstairs and shopping objects. So I think it would.
Cool.
I think it would have a. I think they'd be interested. Yeah, I'll give you detail.
That's a great link. Thank you very
networking
much.
there.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome. Oh yeah, let's have a cheer. Woo! And then I'll edit out a little weird gap.
You've been listening to the WomanUp podcast. To find more of our episodes, subscribe via any of the usual podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and more. For captioned episodes, please visit the WomanUp YouTube channel. And for news and updates, follow us on Instagram at woman.up.podcast.